Hi, everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news. Lots of news this week coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you please help us get the word out about China EVs and More to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. A Beijing-bound Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Hey, good evening from Beijing. I've been here for just over a month, almost exactly a month, yesterday to the day. This is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 125. So let's talk about what just happened today. 13 ministries and commissions and what have you announced this latest measures to boost auto consumption, and especially emphasis to support NEVs. Yet again, what do you call that? Another carrot? And this comes earlier.
And a bit of concern. It sounds like they're pretty concerned.
This comes earlier in the week when the GDP numbers for Q2 and the first half of the year came out. And there's obviously different angles to look at the economy. But when you combine these two things, I mean, this is throughout the first 7 months of the year, we've seen several announcements come out voicing, basic support for consumption, not only NEVs but autos in general. So I think it's what we've been talking about pretty much quite often of this economy and what the government is thinking about boosting, the consumption side of it. Not only, parallel, there was another notice that came out on electronics, same day, today. Yeah, so that's the big news of today, if not the week.
So a bit of background, and for those that follow the Chinese economy or global economy pretty closely, the Chinese economy has had difficulties restarting completely since getting out of zero COVID strategy in January, effectively. Or would you say January, February?
Well, December.
Yeah, December. And so the numbers, according to global economists, looked weaker than they had expected. And China is looking at around a 5% growth rate for 2023, which is pretty low. Now, they're growing much faster than most other countries. I think the United States was at 2% or something like that. So, but remember that we're talking about two completely different economies here. And we also know that the price war has really, really boosted the NEV sector. And I don't know if the government believes how much longer the price war can sustain these boosts in sales, at least on the NEV side. And I was reading today, just this morning, that ICE sales in 2023 have fallen by 8%. And so what we're seeing is a lot of concern because NEVs really need to make up for a lot of those lost sales on the ICE side, which is currently happening. But they obviously believe that there needs to be more stimulus in order to finish 2023 stronger than it started. But we should be paying attention to the overall Chinese economy, because if people aren't confident, if people aren't feeling good about what's going on in China from an economic standpoint, they're going to keep those checkbooks closed. So, which is a concern. Real estate pricing has been going down in China for quite a bit now. And a disproportionate amount of Chinese people's wealth is wrapped up in real estate. So more so in China than a lot of the other established economies around the world. So
yeah, so in Beijing, the real estate is been pretty stable, I would say, but some other areas have been worse off in terms of housing prices. But I think for the GDP or the economic numbers, the Western media, I think, focus on several, the 6.5% growth was kind of inflated because of what happened in Q2 last year, right? So that's the caveat. And it was lower than consensus. I think it was like 7.3% for Q2. And then the quarter on quarter, Q2 over Q1 was 0.8%, right? Growth. And then June retail sales compared to May, it was actually down. And not only the Western media, but me being down here, being in Beijing and talking to family friends, the issue of unemployment often comes up
among the young.
So 21.3%, I think, was another record for the 16 to 24-year-old group. So it is really a serious situation. And back to the measures announced today.
Let me stop you there for a second, Lei.
Yeah.
Daisuke Wakabayashi, a New York Times journalist who's based in Seoul, was interviewed for the New York Times podcast, and he speaks specifically about real estate and the unemployment rate. And for those that are interested in learning about what's going on with the Chinese economy overall, less about cars and electronics, but just generally speaking, I think it's a 25-minute podcast, and it's worth a listen for those that are wondering about how influential the real estate market and how dire for young people the employment market looks. He in one statistic he stated was that for the government jobs, because when we lived there, Lei, most young people didn't want to go work for the government, and there are many opportunities to work in tech. And so that's changed now. And Daisuke said that for every one government job, there's 80 applications on average. So anyways, moving back to EVs.
Yeah, to the consumption boosting measures announced today. So anytime when you have 13 different ministries and commissions jointly announce something on auto consumption, now that's very serious and significant, because there have been so far this year.
That's an all hands on deck kind of thing.
Yeah, there have been individual announcements from MOFCOM, from, let's say, NDRC, MIT, but I mean, taxation, customs bureau, finance, this is pretty significant. Although there's still yet, you're talking about the ICEs, because ICEs are still 70% of the market. And the only remaining wild card is whether we're still going to see some kind of a purchase tax incentive for the ICEs. So that happened the second half of last year. And I mean, that's whatever have been announced concrete measures. We already know the extension of the NEV purchase tax exemption. That's one thing. So, and in this, I thought interesting on some of the details. One thing I thought was interesting. So, I've been driving the Avatar 11, and charging, there's two fees involved when you do a charging. So there's the electricity fee, and then there's the service fee. That combines into how much you pay. So let's say I pay renminbi 1.6 for fast charging per kilowatt hour. So in this measure, they talked about reducing this kind of service fee, and so it's really these little minute details.
But it creates this more frictionless environment for new NEV buyers, which is trying to encourage them to buy.
And I think out of the 10 measures, 10 points, I think 2 or 3 at least were specifically on the support for, again, battery swapping.
Well, one of the 10, Lei, which again, this is kind of an English translation, so I don't know. You tell me how accurate this sounds, but they talked about accelerating the phase out of ICEs. I don't know in Chinese language what did you read that same thing?
No, I think it's there's a couple of things. So there's the used vehicle transactions.
Yep.
Make it more convenient, but I think the bigger picture is really trading in for NEVs. So that's probably the kind of the wording that I would see.
Yeah. And so about the used car market, it's definitely not as mature as a Europe or the United States. And so that's another threat to the OEMs who are still trying to churn out millions and millions of cars. A robust used car market puts pressure on new car sales, obviously. And so if it gets built out, which it has been growing significantly over the last several quarters, that's another concern for CEOs, specifically foreign CEOs. So
Yeah, it's specifically on, the mentioning of China 3 emissions and below vehicles. There's still vehicles running, and really you can still upgrade to a latest emission standard ICE vehicle. There's no problem. But and the other thing was really, I thought, really number one out of the 10 is to increase quotas in regions where there's restrictions in place. So that's a sign, really. I think, whether it's economy as a priority or something else as priority. Let's say restrictions, let's say traffic. So that's pretty clear, I think, to me was.
or keeping keeping the factories going, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's differentiate between what the central government is wanting versus at the provincial level, at the local level, and the municipal level, because how it's interpreted could be different in Shanghai versus a Beijing versus a Changsha, Chengdu. And so there could be great intent from the central government in order to boost the economy. But, a lot of these provincial leaders, they might be there 3, 4, 5, 7 years, and they're wanting their promotion. And so the system is made so that sometimes it can be gamed, right? And so I think it's important to really kind of bring that up, because the central government might have these new policies to encourage X, Y, and Z, and then they're interpreted differently, or because it's just really difficult to kind of have these checks and balances at the local level. So
Yeah, and the other ones are really just the use and purchase of NEVs, the support of that on the public sector, right? Transport and all that stuff.
So I'm going to throw this out there, Lei, because if I'm the central government and I want to increase consumption and purchase of NEVs, then in the back of my head, I kind of want the price war to continue. But outwardly, you're saying that you want competitive companies, you want strong companies, but in order for, an easy lever is to keep these NEV pricing or MSRPs low, okay? But the fear and the problem and the risk is that if they stay low for a prolonged period of time, these OEMs and these China EV first companies will not be able to get that margin back, because the consumer will expect razor thin margins.
That's the thing. That's the thing. In Beijing, for example, the last few times that I've checked out these showrooms, every single time they tell me that before the end of August, there's this 10,000 RMB incentives if you trade in a vehicle of 6 years and more, which I have a car, or my dad used to have a car that's a 2010 car, and it's a China 4 standard. And with the purchase tax exemption, with that incentive trade-in, and with also individual brands offering these, when you go to the showroom, they have these monthly incentives. It really makes you, want to get an EV because there's these incentives going on.
If you're trying to be thinking like a Chinese consumer, it would make you gun shy though a little bit too, because there could be more incentives. It's just a crazy time in the EV sector because we're still seeing price cuts. So if you're buying or if you're wanting to buy, you might want to wait, you might do it and then have regret because there's another price cut. So
then again, the ID3, the ones, 7,000 units, I think that went on sale, they're all sold out. So the 120,000 RMB ID3.
Can you imagine that? 120,000. So that's a $20,000 car.
Yeah. If you get down to a certain point.
How much money did Volkswagen lose on each of those cars?
Yeah.
But, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Let's move on, Lei, to the other kind of big pieces of news. Audi SAIC. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I guess we're just waiting for the official announcement on how exactly that deal is structured. It's not a if and it's when. It's not if, right? That we know. And again, right? We talked about this last episode that this market for technology has now become technology for market. How times have changed and desperate, right? You used it in your newsletter, desperate. We talked about this last episode.
Yeah, because they media kind of pointed to, and I don't want to take away anything from Shanghai Auto's tech stack, right? It might be great, but to me, I look at it more like a tough pill to swallow for Audi. They looked objectively and they realized how desperate they are. If they are to remain relevant in the Chinese market, they need to do a lot of things really quickly. And, I'm hammering that theme, Lei, over the last 6 months, 7 months about the make to buy decision. This is a buy instead of every single legacy, specifically legacy OEM. Whenever it's a major hardware decision, a major software decision, they're looking at it like, how much time do we have? How much budget do we have? How fast do we need it? And so everything is a make or buy decision. And Audi at this point decided to buy.
And the fact that Volkswagen signed those MOUs last week with FAW is a precursor, because one is showing commitment to your one partner.
And in the public too, publicly showing.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, as soon as that MOUs, that the pictures came out, that the news release came out, I'm saying, Audi SAIC is not going to be too far behind. And now we know, right, that it's coming. So Audi, I think in China will have two routes. So the PPE with FAW, that's still continues, but with the SAIC, they're utilizing this, this buy, let's say, route. Yeah, but is that going to help? I don't know. I mean,
so this is the thing about Audi, Lei, and I'd love your opinion because I firmly believe I'm right. So I don't know if you're going to be able to convince me otherwise. But the digital natives in China who grew up seeing Audi as the government vehicle, I don't know if they can get that out of their head when they're going to buy an EV or buy a vehicle. I just think it's really difficult for them to do that. What do you think?
Well, I think differently. I think it is past that legacy, but at the end of the day, it's really the products design, tuning to customer needs
and the cost. Because the Germans, one of the things that the Germans have not been great about is reading the room and figuring out the pricing strategy for their EVs, because they are super expensive in China. So
yeah, I mean, Audi has a really, I mean, in terms of branding and marketing, I mean, they use Andy Lau, right? This is Hong Kong singer actor as a brand ambassador.
I was in a movie with him. I told you that, right?
Yeah.
Anyways,
so I mean, they have a lot of assets, but just the yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I love the e-tron, the RS. It looks great, the coupe thing, but it has terrible range, and so it's a great and beautiful car. It's just not a great EV, and it's super expensive. And it is burned into my brain at the Shanghai Auto Show, going to Zeekr and just 3 or 4 people deep to wait in line to get into the X, and then heading over to Audi and not having to wait at all to get into that e-tron. And so that kind of influences my thoughts on the whole. I think Audi makes beautiful cars, but the image that's burned into the younger Chinese consumer is that, okay, it's a black A6 that a government official is using. So anyways.
Yeah, we'll see how this deal is set up when it's announced, what platform is going to be used.
Do you think this automatically turns Audi around?
No.
I don't think so either.
It's going to take some time, if at all.
So
in comparison, what BMW has done with the i3 is they're actually pricing I believe, the i3 below the ICE 3 Series
Yes.
on some trims. And this is something that Mercedes won't do. But the thing is also really with all three ABBs, all of their current EVs are based on ICE, let's say, kind of the platforms and models, right?
Yep.
So that is probably something when the new platforms come out, when these new vehicles come out, will it change? We don't know. We'll see.
And let me give you something from last week. I presented to a group of folks, a decent number of Mercedes employees in Michigan at their R&D facility just outside of Detroit about the global EV sector with an emphasis on China. And it was eye-opening for them. And I was just throwing out simple statistics that you and I have talked about probably a number of times over the last several episodes and throughout the time we've been doing this podcast. But the rank and file outside of China don't know really what's going on. And I'm talking about German expats living in Michigan working for Merck. And so when I told them this, I think a little bit, they were a bit incredulous, but I challenged them to Google all this information because it's out there. But yeah, they don't know. And I'm not trying to cry wolf, and I'm not trying to run around yelling that the sky is falling. But the big three, the ABB, they have a disproportionate amount of reliance on the China market. When times were good, it was awesome for them. But to your point, they're still using ICE platforms. Audi finally conceded that they need help signing an MOU or agreeing with SAIC to use their EV platform. But that's step one. That doesn't guarantee anything, because if Audi doesn't put something on top of that platform and inside that platform with the proper software, so there's still a lot of constraints. Now, does Audi become a design house for SAIC and Huawei in China? I don't know. That's an extreme case, but I still don't believe their software capabilities at all are going to materialize in the next 18, 20 months. That's not going to happen.
And you and I have been talking to a good friend over at Jidu and look for some, I guess, surprises.
Oh man.
We don't want to share too much of,
For the listeners, Jidu is the 55% owned Baidu and 45% owned Geely joint venture, Jidu Auto. Okay. Yeah. And they are planning to deliver their first vehicle, the Robo One, later this year. And Geely's only responsibility is manufacturing, and Baidu's only responsibility is providing the tech stack and the machine learning system. And so I had the pleasure of visiting in April and super impressed, aiming directly at the Model Y. All this stuff with the Robo One, all this stuff is on the internet. So no secrets that I'm telling you. But there are no buttons. There are no knobs. A lot of commands are going to be voice controlled or gesture controlled. So if everything works out, and I've said this in the past, if everything works out for Jidu Auto, they're going to be pushing and pulling everyone forward because they have an advantage, because Baidu, they should be by far the best at the voice recognition and the engines that would drive all that stuff in the vehicle. And so I am really excited because I don't think there's, let me say, full stop. If the potential is reached, there's nothing out there in the market that's close. So
so let's just say from what I feel, that pushing boundaries is probably an understatement for Jidu in all facets of, whether it's design, how things work, pricing.
and you need to do that to differentiate yourself in the China market, because
in this day and age,
any incremental improvements gets copied at a lower cost within 6 months. Okay. And our friend Jiri, the Car News China guy, he had written a deep dive into how the China EV Inc. can move at China speed, right? And our friend at Jidu said, I appreciate China's speed, but we have Jidu speed here. So, for those that are wondering, we had interviewed Frank Wu, who is the head of design at Jidu, for one of our Max episodes about a year ago. And he was really open and he's got a great story. Super smart guy, went to design school here in Detroit, worked at General Motors for about 7 years, and then went over, was it BAIC? He did BAIC for a little bit.
Yeah, BAIC, yeah.
And then he became the head of design, told us that he wasn't getting paid for the first 30 or 60 days while working with GDU. And he's super proud of what they've been able to accomplish from a design standpoint. They've won, he said, 7 Red Dot Awards. So the design team kicks butt. So anyways, I invite, and remember, Xiaomi is still out there. GDU is still out there. What other brands? Bianca has been deathly quiet. So, are there any other brands that are coming?
Well, we just saw the pictures of the Bao 5, right?
Oh, yeah.
Fangcheng Bao 5, right? So, looks pretty sweet.
Defender Land Cruiser had a baby, and that's what it looks like, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's going to sell really well.
Yeah, and just no time to breathe, right?
I don't know how BYD does it because, as you can see, I mean, they have exponentially more employees than the Xpungs, the Liatos, and the Neos. But man, they're a machine. They're just crushing it. And to reflect on some of BYD's accomplishments, for the second year in a row, Wang Chuanfu is the number 1 CEO in China. As
you were talking about the Forbes, or
the Forbes. Why he isn't the top 2 or top 3 CEO globally is beyond me. Probably a little bit of, I won't say it too much, but some bias, some yellow bias maybe. But this is, and this week, and let's move on to this next topic. Yeah. So BYD is looking at partnering with the current JV partner they have for electric buses in India, which has been their partner for several years, and building electric vehicles in India. So a little bit of background. India became the 3rd largest car market in the world last year, behind China and the United States. They overtook Japan. They overtook Germany. They were at around 3.8 million units. So on a base of 1.5 billion people, it's mice nuts. It's a rounding error. But it tells you about the growth opportunity. And so BYD, and let me take a step back. So China has also had a challenging relationship with India, and we're talking about governments. And so India passed a law that said bordering countries needed, if they wanted to start businesses in India, they needed a joint venture partner.
You mean the bordering country?
Yeah. Well,
not bordering countries.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean,
there's only basically one, right?
It's like saying, oh, yeah, exactly. But they didn't want to obviously say that in the law, right? So bordering countries. And Tesla has famously been trying to enter India as well, and trying to bully India into signing a deal with them that is probably not in India's best interest. And they've been unable to do that. And the rumor is that Tesla wanted to build a factory, but they wanted approval and a reduction in tariffs in order to ship Chinese-made 3s and Ys into India. And India was like, yeah, no way. So with BYD now adding pressure, you better believe Tesla's probably reducing some of their requirements for getting into the Indian market.
So both BYD and Tesla have their own respective leverages. So the recent, what we've seen with Modi being in the US, meeting Elon, I think geopolitically, the relationship is great, but not on China. But on the flip side, BYD is not a stranger to India, right? As if you say, they've worked with this mega engineering for a number of years. So that's their leverage of having been on the ground.
And they're shipping kits currently.
And having worked with a local partner, which Tesla do not have. So you have this kind of a race going on.
And which is similar to BYD's strategy in the United States.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting because India could be a kind of a hub, not only because of the nascency of the EV sector. It's almost like more than a decade ago in China when it started, right? And the early part of last decade.
Yes. And the foreign companies all invested billions of dollars about 15 years ago or 10 years ago or 9 8 years ago into Indian capacity, knowing that the per capita GDP was continuing to grow. But because India is a pretty corrupt country, it's democratic, and so things are slow to move. Let's say that India's speed is a little bit different than China's speed.
Yeah, there's no
But
speed, I guess.
so the thought from the foreign automakers was, okay, we can be patient because what we'll do is we'll build a beachhead factory in India. We will sell as many as we can domestically from that capacity and then export the rest of it. But what happened was that that market never materialized. So after 4 or 5, 6 years, most of those foreign OEMs kind of abandoned the Indian market. But what we're seeing now, and again, this has a lot more to do with the current political situation domestically for India. Because for those of you that have been there recently, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I haven't been there recently, but I have a lot of friends, classmates that live there, and the pollution is choking. And it's like 2013 through 2016 in Beijing, Lei, where
Yeah,
you can taste it at airports and that kind of thing. So if Modi wants to stay in power, he's got to clean those air, the air in India. And how do you do that? You do that by cleaning up the vehicles. But for India, just like the rest of Southeast Asia, the mode of transport, private passenger vehicle, is normally two wheels, not four
yeah.
wheels. And so the opportunity is still there because with even with that low take rate from a number of vehicles per thousand people, even with that low take rate, we're still talking about 4 million cars, right? So it's a significant market, even though it's still very small.
Yeah, even from a product perspective, BYD has the leverage over Tesla because the BYD has the dolphins, the seagulls, which are better suited for the Indian market because it's a small car market, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's another leverage.
And we have to remember, Lei, that India for India is important, but India to Australia, India to Southeast Asia is also a huge opportunity. So
Yeah, there's many ways you can break this down.
I would argue, Lei, that if I am in Tesla's board meetings and I'm looking at global manufacturing footprint and thinking about increasing capacity of Shanghai Giga to 2.5 million, I want to de-risk all of that capacity being there by building in Mexico, building in India, so that if there are any problems or any challenges in China, then I can still increase capacity in these other lower cost countries and still build vehicles, still build profitable vehicles. And another reason, if the Model 2 launches in the next 3 years, perfect. Mexico, Latin America, South America is a perfect market for a $20,000 Model 2. India, perfect market for a $20,000 Model 2. So always in the back of my mind, Lei, is this 20 million by 2030. So if that is the number one rule for Tesla, then they need more manufacturing and they need this Model 2 to be built in several places in around the globe. So
Yeah, so the only way this will work is India maximizes their own interest and BYD agrees on some of the requirements, then probably it'll work. But I mean, there's a lot of beef going on between China and India at the geopolitical level.
which, and this is the challenging thing for these companies, these Chinese companies, because they're now the shoe was on the other foot for the longest time, right? Foreign companies in China. But now it's Chinese companies trying to do business outside of China that are kind of caught in the crossfire between the governments. Okay.
And I don't know if you've heard this. So I just saw this this afternoon that
You got a rumor?
there's some talks of the robo-taxi companies, the China AV Inc. running in the U.S. There's some scrutiny over that. Reports about Pete Buttigieg and some, I don't know, senators are talking about the potentially of not allowing the China AV Inc. to run these robo-taxis who've gotten the permits from DMVs, the California DMV. I don't know whether you've heard this or saw this.
I've heard it, but I've heard it for a year or two, but
yeah.
nothing's
So because
happened.
of the information they collect, right? The same for right, the Tesla FSD in China and everybody else. So, and going back to Li Bin's the Tesla red carpet comment last week, right?
But it's Li Bin is a one-sided comment because there are no Waymos in China. There are no cruises in China. So I think it's important that we just kind of look at this objectively, right? And it's also the reason why Pony, AutoX, WeRide, Baidu, I think it's less so in the United States, but that's why they're deathly silent, right? In the US market. They don't really advertise or do anything, right? Unless you're in Milpitas and you can see them with their Pony badges and stuff like that. Because Pony is also has a commercialization pilot in Southern California in Orange County who was delivering groceries
in
from
Fremont,
an Asian.
Right?
What's that?
Wasn't it Fremont or
I think
I've seen some in Irvine also. So
yeah, so they partnered with an Asian online supermarket and were delivering groceries in Irvine, I believe. So it's funny that you bring this up, Lei, because this week was also in San Francisco where they wanted to, I think Waymo or Cruise wanted to start charging for non-safety driverless robo-taxis. And California and San Franciscans pushed back because the current crop of Cruise, two of which we've ridden in, Ant and what's that second one? I forget. But they are causing a lot of traffic jams, supposedly. And one of the ways to stop these robo-taxis in their tracks, at least on the Cruise side, is throwing a cone on the hood. The robo-taxi will stop immediately and throw its hazards on.
Yeah. You asked me about it last week.
Yeah. But, and I wrote about this in the newsletter because there's an article in Axios and it said something and on the title, I added a little bit to it because we should be talking about the global autonomous vehicle sector. Oh, so the title said robotaxis face their moment of truth. And then I said, she forgot a couple of words and I put ... in the US. And so, because you and I know that there are several pilots across several cities, Changsha, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Beijing, Shanghai, quite a few of which we've tried, right? So, and it's still very limited in the United States. And so the only way this is going to work and the pushback from the city of San Francisco prompted Cruise to take a full page ad out in a lot of newspapers.
Safer than humans or something?
Yeah, 42,000 people die a year. And Cruise was like, humans are terrible drivers.
Yeah. Cruise pulled out a Elon Musk. That's what Cruise did.
So, well, because, and this is the thing, right? Because GM doesn't have Google money. GM doesn't have Waymo money.
No.
And so they really want to commercialize this because I've said before, every legacy OEM wants to have a robust mobility platform with the two signature services being eVTOL, long-term anyways, eVTOL and robotaxis. And that's where that margin is going to be driven. they're going to have grocery delivery, food delivery. They're going to have micromobility sharing, but that's to increase the install base so that their signature services can be accessible to more people. And that won't happen for another 15 years, but this is where ultimately the OEMs really want to go. And I think to see that transformation is going to be awesome. All the disruption that's going on in the United States specifically, because we're talking about billions of dollars. So let's do this. It's 9:53, Lay. Let's open the room up for anyone who has any questions. We'll continue to talk for a few minutes and then try to close out if no one has any questions at around 10 o'clock, 10 or something like that. But I'm not sure, and shame on you if you haven't, Lay, but I'm not sure if you got a chance to see the newsletter this week. But
yeah, I did.
Arkansas is like this lithium hotbed now.
Yes, in Arkansas. Is that the Wall Street Journal article you're referring to?
It was the Times article. I think it was the New York
Times.
Yeah, Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal article. Wall Street
Journal also had one, right?
Yeah.
About the lithium.
ExxonMobil is investing $100 million.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a gold rush, and where I think that data gold rush is kind of a wonky kind of anomaly, kind of how they say it. Data is a little bit different, but lithium, yeah, I think there's a lithium rush in North America for sure. And you can point to Canada protecting their mines. You can point to Mexico protecting their lithium mines. So
again, it's only a small piece. The availability of it, where it's found, is only a small piece, small link of the entire value chain.
Yeah,
we got to remember that, right? Processing, refining, all of these things.
Yeah, I think
you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Whenever there's huge investment, there's also innovation, right? So I'm looking forward to innovations in refining. I'm looking forward to innovations in mining. I'm looking forward to new use cases for mobility. And there's two things that I also want to bring up to close this out. Cybertruck, first pre-production vehicle off the line. And so when I say that, let me explain that a bit further, because assume that every Cybertruck up to this point, prior to that one that they tweeted about this week, comes as handmade. So it's in a big room, and these parts are being shipped from prototype shops in order to check the fit and finish, in order to make sure that everything works together. And then they'll go through EVT and DVT and PVT. So engineering validation, and then production validation. And so once everything has been approved, meaning that they have final approvals, then these parts will be ordered from the supplier who will supply them. And they'll have to build it off of production tooling. Okay. And it might be the first 20, it might be the first 50, it might be the first 100. They're called pre-production cars, alpha, beta, and then pilot. And pilot vehicles are saleable, but they're normally marketing cars. So they'll get shipped around, take pictures, media cars.
Yeah, it's the same as the Zeekr X I saw the other day. It's not the final production vehicle. Yeah.
Right. And so
at least in the showroom.
So this Cybertruck was I believe the first one off of the production line using production tooling. And so we're still a good 1/4 probably before job one rolls off the line. Job one is always the first saleable vehicle of that product off of the factory line. Okay. Yeah. And so 4 years in the making, 4 years in the making.
Yeah. And as soon as that picture came out, Ford dropped prices at the F-150.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because to me they relate. They're relative, right?
Yeah.
And there was a chart in one of the, I think it was Wall Street Journal, that showed that when the Lightning launched, it was 40,000, and it went to 52, then it went to 57. Now it's back down to 50. And I've always rung that bell that said we don't get to mass adoption until there are many products under 50,000, many EV products in the United States under $50,000. So, and we also have to remember, in order to be eligible for the $7,500 tax incentive, it has to be under $88,000. And so the average price of an F-150 is like super sky high. It's like 70, 80 grand. So I wrote about this a little bit in the newsletter as well, Lei. I think Cybertruck is going to be pretty successful in the United States. There's going to be a market for it, 50, 60, 70, 80,000, 100,000 units easy in the United States once they ramp up easy annually. No market for it at all in Europe. And then difficulties if they wanted to sell it in China. So what do you think? I think it would sell in China.
Yeah, this is a topic that often comes up about me talking to some of the industry people here, that they ask about the U.S. market. And I say to them that unlike China, where the Model 3 and Y plays, in the U.S., there's not a single, even as of now, there's not a single competitor that can challenge 3 and the Y. Not one. But in the pickup market, which is almost like the same as the microvan market, it's people's product, right? It's not a luxury product. It's pickup. It's people, everyday life.
Yeah, it's rimmen.
The middle class, right? They drive pickups, and the electrification of that segment. This is where the competition is, besides Tesla, right? Is pretty hot right now. And that's why you see the F-150 Lightning dropping prices. And it's a completely different segment competition-wise, U.S. and China.
And for our non-U.S. listeners, that's why GM is launching the Silverado. That's why Ram is launching the E-Ram, because it's such a lucrative and important market and product for the U.S., for them, because without the F-150, Ford is nothing effectively in the US. And for GM, so GM's a little bit weird because they have more brands, right? Ford has Lincoln, and is that it? They have Lincoln and Ford. GM has GMC.
The thing is,
go ahead.
No, the thing is, for the big three, the American companies, including Stellantis, they make their most profit out of North America. Their trucks are their cream of the products that make the most of the profit for them. So that's why the competition, EV, electrification, is in that segment.
The F-150 is the best-selling truck in the United States, in North America. So
yeah, for how many years in a row? So
in and of itself is a larger business than the iPhone is to Apple. And with GM, it's a little misleading because they have the Chevy Silverado and the GMC Sierra. And so both of those sell about
Hummer, EV, and pickup, right? Those type of,
which is just launched like a year and a half ago. I'm starting to see them a bit more. And I did see a Blazer, an EV Blazer this week, Lei. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, they're launching in the summer, right? Later in the summer.
Hugely important vehicles for GM, because the Equinox is supposed to be $30,000 EV and the Blazer should be a $40,000 EV. How they will maintain that pricing, I have no idea, but let's see how popular they are. So where the US government needs to be careful is describing, oh, we're going to catch up, we're going to overtake. They're chasing a ghost if they keep on saying stuff like that. The US market, China market, completely different entities, but the challenge for the foreign automakers is that over-reliance on the China market really creates a lot of risk, because, and I'm not talking because the government might change their attitude. I'm talking because Chinese consumers could change their attitudes about the brand, which we're seeing with Volkswagen Group. So
it's a little bit past 10. I did want to talk a little bit about NIO Power Day.
Okay.
A little bit. Yeah. So which happened yesterday. So my general impression is they threw a lot of numbers of accomplishment of their, let's make this clear, of their power charging and swap network, first of all. And I think many people, when they think of NIO, they think about power swap. But after Tesla, they have the most of their own branded chargers operating in China. I think people may not realize that, but NIO, it's NIO. And I think that they threw a lot of numbers. It was great. It's fantastic. It's great for their customers, but it did nothing to pump the stock and the value of NIO. So what I'm trying to say is, I think what NIO is betting on is they're still trying to have their power swap network or the power swap itself become the de facto standard in China so that, like their chargers, somehow this network could be utilized akin to Tesla's NACS. I think that's what they're betting on.
They have a lot less leverage on the charging though. The swap is pretty much exclusively theirs, except for I think SAIC and BAIC have no Geely and SAI or
Alton.
but the
Geely has a little bit.
charging stations, they already have one standard plug in China.
Yeah. Competitively, they just said, those 9 benefits, right? They counted and explained in detail in the press conference. And then following what the SAIC Rising Auto did with, adding features such as when you do the power swap, you can actually do other things in the car, which you can't right now. So
they're updating the software to allow you to access the infotainment system. Yeah.
Yeah. So that because somebody else is doing it, I have to do it. I have to have the same feature. That's the competitive environment. That if you don't have something, you lose out. FOMO. The word is FOMO.
Right. I will make 2 quick other things that are, I think, worth noting. Dojo computer for Tesla is in production now, and big difference. Dojo is the training computer, supercomputer for effectively getting FSD right. So I think that was an important milestone that Tesla had articulated. Distinction between what they were doing before with training versus now. They were using NVIDIA ASICs or silicon. Now they're using their own design silicon. So I think that's an important distinction. And the last thing I wanted to say was GM hired an external chief marketing officer. Why aren't other people doing this, Lei? It boggles my mind that they're not bringing in external parties to become managers. So
hometown wins. Hometown Detroit wins. So 2 numbers I wanted to compare is back to the Tesla. So they have 300 million miles of FSD and in that earnings call, right? And that could quickly become billions of miles. And then today, Li Auto came out with an interesting number, 200 million kilometers, not apples to apples, but 200 million kilometers of NOA mileage accumulated over the last, let's just say, a year and a half. And that number is expected to reach 500 million by the end of the year.
For our American friends, we're talking about 120 million if it's 200 million. So
yeah, so that's interesting. So who knows? Li Auto may even catch up on some of the X-Bone USPs, right?
And that's the secret race to watch. The standalone autonomous vehicle companies, the WeRides, the Apollo, the Ponies, the Waymos, and the Cruise versus the OEM ADAS race, because ADAS is going to eventually merge into level 4, level 5. So
yeah. So I think ADAS advanced features L2+++ is the race to watch among these smart EV startups.
Yep.
Other than the products themselves.
And GM is unique because they have Ultra Cruise for Cadillac, and then they have Cruise Automation on the robotaxi side. I don't know, and this is a good question. Maybe I'll do some due diligence and research here. I don't know how much of that tech overlaps. Do they have a separate team at GM and then Cruise is also separate? I'm not sure. I'll try to find out more about that, Lei. But everyone else is, Deep Route, WeRide, they are partnering with some of the state-owned enterprises that don't have that capability or technology in-house. So we are seeing some of the standalone AV companies work with OEMs, but the XPengs, the Li Autos, the NIOs, they have robust teams, right, in Silicon Valley, in Europe, and in China that are working specifically on the ADAS stuff. So That's all I have, man.
Yeah, and also seeing BYD in recent times talk more about their advanced smart driving capabilities.
And I'm still not sure whether or not they have outsourced that completely to DJI or if they are supplementing their in-house with DJI. There's not been anything else written about that, so still wondering about that.
No, I haven't seen that. Yeah.
And congratulations to the United Kingdom. They finally got a win. Jaguar Land Rover has committed
JLR.
£4 billion.
It's JLR.
Oh, it's not Jaguar Land Rover. It's JLR. Okay. JLR has committed £4 billion to build a gigafactory. And that's the first major win, I believe, for them in quite some time because their national champion for battery cell manufacturing, Britishvolt, blew up. And so the uncertainty with Brexit, it being a right-hand drive and labor market or the labor rates being pretty high made the UK fairly unattractive relative to the rest of Europe to be building beachheads from a manufacturing or battery cell manufacturing standpoint. But, that's a big win. And JLR, it should be noted that Jaguar and Land Rover are both British companies. And so it makes a ton of sense. Anyways, that's all I had this week, Lei. I think we had a good chat.
Same here, man. And so I've been here in Beijing for a month. So I have another month remaining. So I might plan a couple of trips, maybe one to Hefei a bit. And then obviously Shenzhen, I wanted to go down there.
去看 Neo?
Yeah, Neo and Goshen, they're all there. So to check out, have a couple of visits. So planning that. China is not Beijing. China is many places, right?
I would argue that China is not Beijing because it's so different. But
China is not Beijing, exactly.
Yeah, I was going to join you, but I don't think that's going to happen. Anyways, so okay, everyone. Hey, thanks for listening. Please join us again next week. And apologies for my snafus on this Spaces room. You were probably trying to find it on the invitation, but I turned it off and then turned it back on, and it's a totally different room. Anyways, again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Likewise, talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SINOAUTOINSIGHT. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.